a Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Tim from the Sapphire Running Zone, and this is another in our Runner Stories podcast series. And today we've got a man who has done a fair few races. Andrew is going to tell us his story, and I'm not sure on a 30-minute podcast we'll have enough time to cram it all in, but this man is about to do his 100th half marathon. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Tim, and thanks for inviting me on. It's great to be here. So when I did that first half marathon some 23 years ago, like most people, I got to the end, hadn't really contemplated even a second, and was marveling at how people ran twice as far and did these things called marathons. So Sunday, is a day. In many ways, well, I certainly was not in the early stages was planned, although latterly, clearly it became a bit of a focus via one or two health blips. And also, of course, COVID intervened, which rather slowed down the progress. I didn't think it was going to take quite this long to get to 100.
So what was your first one?
First one was Great North Run in 2001. Like many people, I should say, I suspect many people would start with a great run. In those days, they would advertise on the telly at the London Marathon. I distinctly remember Steve Cram saying, if you'd like to do the Great North Run later in the year, get a pen and paper. We'll tell you how you enter. Can you imagine entering a Great North Run in April now for the following September? It's like ballots and everything else. So I got my pen and paper, no idea why or what possessed me. And some 6 months later, found myself on Tyneside and heading down to the coast.
Yeah, that's an interesting race, isn't it? It's obviously a massive event, and you know, absolutely dominates the city. I'm assuming, and obviously the one you've got coming up for your 100th, which is the Landmarks this Sunday, very similar in a lot of respects, dominates the city.
Yeah, so I mean, I did 5 Great North runs in a row back in those early 2000s. I did 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I've only then subsequently been back once, and that was a couple of years ago. And even I noticed how much a big event had grown into an enormous event, I guess. Um, Over the course of the 100, I've done several repeats. I think Reading is my most run half marathon. I think I've done 10 of those. Um, so for me, Landmarks, it'll be the first one I've ever done. So that in itself is quite exciting to do a new one. Um, but it has, for me, that's security of being a big event. I'm sure we'll touch on some of the things that have happened to me on the road to get to my 100th half marathon. So for me, it's now nice to be part of bigger events where there's that sense of, or that avoiding that fear that most people have of being last and being overtaken by a man picking up cones and telling me to go home because he's had enough. So I'm looking forward to the Landmarks as an event, and I've heard great things about it. So we shall see.
Yeah, indeed. So, which are your other big city centre races then? And because I'd be quite interested to chat later about your different experiences of a big city centre race to a tiny local event. So, which are the big city ones you've done apart from the great runs and Reading, which we'll put down as a big city centre race?
Yeah, gosh, that's quite a hard one, really, without sort of looking at the list. I mean, ones that spring to mind in terms of bigger locations, Glasgow, which was also the great Scottish run, so great run again. Bristol, I've done a couple of times. I did do the half marathon version of the great Manchester run as well. That was 3 or 4 years ago. And quite a few overseas as well. So in big city terms, I think Hong Kong would probably fit that bill. But equally Munich, Toronto, Lisbon. I mean, it's quite. You will gather that it's quite a long list because having done Reading 10 times, and Great North Run 6. There's a few that I have only done the once. So what I don't know is how many different half marathons I've done. So please don't ask me that. That will be quite tricky. Um, but it's proved to be a good excuse to go traveling as well and see other parts of the world. And I find with a half marathon, you can neatly fit it into a weekend away without it impacting your weekend away. I've always found marathons to be quite daunting in terms of not wanting to do too much beforehand and not being able to do too much afterwards. So I think a half is it's kind of a magical distance for average athletes like myself, if indeed I reach the average level.
Oh, don't undersell yourself. No, I totally agree about the half. It's a distance where you can go away for a weekend and it not dominate your 2 or 3 days. Whereas when you're doing a marathon, it's pretty much all you can think about,
Yeah.
and there is no room for maneuver really. You with a half, it doesn't take over, which is fantastic. And it sounds like you've been to some fairly long haul destinations where I presume you've stayed for a little bit more than a weekend, like Hong Kong and Toronto.
Yeah, yeah. Hong Kong wasn't just for a weekend. And Toronto, I have friends. So having said that, they have only been for 4 or 5 nights. They're not necessarily extended stays as such.
Mm,
Um, and then something I would also touch on for the big city ones is some of the smaller ones I've done, which, as you suggested, is a totally different atmosphere set up. Um, and if I may, I'd kind of one I'd highlight is I did the Mull Half Marathon, one of the Western Isles in Scotland, quite a few years ago now. And the entry was it was in double figures, but was nowhere near 100. I think it was about 80 people. Those were in the days when I was a wee bit quicker and could happily get round in just under 2 hours. So I didn't feel like I was keeping everyone back. But I was towards the back of the field. I think I beat 2 people that day. And as I was winding my way along the coast in Mull, and there's water stations, there's absolutely everything you would expect to see. But the marshals were kind of was a Coast Guard vehicle going up and down. And because I was out towards the back, they pulled over at one point and just said, "You okay?" And I went, "Yep, I'm fine." And off they drove. So it's a hugely different experience, almost like one-to-one support. Smallest one I've ever done was Alderney in the Channel Islands, where the field consisted of 10 of us.
mm.
So I had a
Wow.
top 10 finish, which was good. I did come
That,
last, but
that's amazing.
yeah,
A race with 10 people.
yeah.
Gosh. It ends up being like a giant training run, doesn't it? There's obviously no crowd support whatsoever.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a few people at the finish, but then there are water stations out there and there are marshals. So you
Wow.
still feel you're part of an actual event. And Alderney is actually a 2-lap course. So at halfway, you kind of pass through the finish area, or you did. The event no longer takes place. It used to be run by the Rotary Club. I guess running events with only 10 participants. And even the 10K run on the same day only used to get 30 or 40. And then, like many events, I guess COVID arrived and they've not come back since, which is a real shame. It really is
Yeah.
because they have a separate walk section for their half marathon, and walking sections have become a big feature of my recent half marathons. So I would have loved to have gone back to Alderney, but sadly not until they restart the event.
That's a shame. What are some of the other long haul destinations that you've travelled to?
Gosh, that's going to just sound like a list in terms of oh, I've been here, I've been there. Um, I have done one half marathon in New Zealand. Funnily enough, I was browsing on the internet one day and stumbled across this event. I didn't even know where it was, a place called Coatesville, which is an hour or so north of Auckland. And what tempted me was the medals looked quite nice. So I thought, oh, I quite fancy one of them. Um, so I did do that as part of a much bigger trip to Australia and New Zealand. Um, Hong Kong's my Far East one. I have done Dubai. Now, I guess that would tick the big city box again in terms of half marathons. Cape Town in South Africa, going down as far as you can go. Mainly European ones after that. I've never run in South America, and I've only done park runs and the like in Australia. But yeah, I mean, Europe, it really would become a list from Riga in Latvia through Tallinn in Estonia, Warsaw. I mentioned Barcelona, Lisbon, Vienna. Um, yeah, I'm trying not to confuse them with the marathons I've done. I nearly threw Berlin in there, but I've only ever done the Berlin Marathon. Um, the Amsterdam half actually springs to mind. I've only done it the once, and it was quite a few years ago. And what I loved about that was the half marathon you finished in the Olympic Stadium. The marathon you actually started in the Olympic Stadium as well, but the half you just finished in there. Um, and clearly it's been renovated since the Olympics of was it 1924 or 1928? I'm not quite up on my Amsterdam Olympics. And clearly they've renovated the track. And it was the first time I'd ever arrived and run on a track. And at the end of a half marathon, to end up doing 250, 300 meters on a very bouncy, springy surface, I mean, it actually felt quite nice. It probably would be quite energy sapping if you had to do the whole event on that. But I did enjoy Amsterdam for that. Scandinavia, I could throw in Reykjavik and Copenhagen and Stockholm. Yeah, as I say, it starts to become a bit of a I've raced here kind of a list.
And was some of your key, happiest memories from a race, irrespective of whether it was overseas or domestic? I mean, some races go amazingly well, don't they, and others not so much.
Yeah.
Um, what are your sort of favorite races, given your experiences at them?
Again, that's quite a tricky one to answer. There's a lot of memories, good memories from many of the events. There's clearly been tough moments within events. Um, and again, going back a few years, like many, I was very time focused. So, yeah, a few seconds here and there or a few minutes, you'd be thinking, oh no, that was a disaster, or that went really well. Um, I think these days I've become a little less time obsessed. Certainly after my last health blip, which occurred before half marathon 90, not literally before, but between half marathons 96 and 97. So the last three have very much been a case of getting round and finishing and reaching that 100. My 99th stands out for not very good reasons. It's great, isn't it? You asked me a question about what have I enjoyed, and I'm going to twist it around and tell you about what I've not enjoyed. I guess it was a case in point that you can always learn, no matter how many times you've done an event or a distance, is you can always learn. And I was in Malta about a month ago, and trust me, I've done the training miles. It's not as if I just turned up in my flip flops and thought, oh, I'll stroll around. Malta starts with about 4K downhill, and it's quite a significant down. I would call it the sort of downhill you wouldn't want to run up, but not sort of straight off a cliff face kind of thing. And after about 4K, I was getting very, very sore feet. And 4K to 21K is quite a long way when each step is painful. Um, I really didn't enjoy that Malta half marathon at all. But there aren't a whole load of options for stepping off the course and making your being taken to the finish. And of course, I then had the pressure that having started fundraising for my 100th, if I don't complete the 99th, I'm then scrabbling around to find another event. So I'm hoping this coming Sunday, the sore feet problem doesn't recur, whether it's something I'm trusting it was the downhill thing that caused that. But I am going to take a big tub of Vaseline and smother my feet in it first. I mentioned Mull earlier. I mean, clearly that was a favourite, to be running in such beautiful scenery, and not having hundreds of people around you. That was very nice. So the smaller ones, in many ways, are the standout ones. Um,
That's
because
interesting because obviously for a lot of people, the crowd support is a key driver, isn't it? But I think the more you do, that becomes less significant. And obviously for you, it was more about the scenery and the surroundings than the crowd because you were self motivated, weren't you?
yeah, and I guess it's the contrast because you've kind of everyone's no, say everyone's done a Great North Run or a big city event. To actually be doing an organized event where there's only 9 other participants, and yet every 3 miles there's someone giving you a cup of water or what have you. Um, I guess you get a chance to actually, take in what's around you rather than run with those blinkers on, staring at your watch, thinking, how much quicker can I go? Clearly, personal bests have also stood out as well. Um, I struggled for a little while to run under 2 hours, and that became a real, millstone round my neck. I could almost begin to feel how Roger Bannister might have felt back in the 50s with his 4 minute thing. Um, and the closest I came before I did it was down in Bristol, and I actually ran 2 hours and 13 seconds.
Oh,
And as I was heading into the last mile, I was kind of looking at my watch and looking at it, and I always knew it wasn't quite going to be there. So that was kind of frustrating. When I did finally break the 2 hour mark, which was my 25th half marathon, was the Great Eastern Run in Peterborough. Beautiful flat course. And I knew I was ready for it. I knew I had really trained, and it was one of those classics, it, something had to go badly wrong for me not to finally go under 2 hours. And I warmed up and I headed off. And there was a smaller 5K on the same day that cut off the main half marathon course at, I think it was about the mile mark. It was just before there. And they were due to start behind us. So off us half marathoners go. And I've barged my way to as near to the front as I can get because I'm here to set a PB and therefore I need to be at the front. Sound familiar? Um, and I checked my watch for the first time where the 5K course peeled off. So it was about a mile marker. And I looked and my watch hadn't started. So
oh.
here I am trying to pace a race under 2 hours, and I've lost the first mile to timing. So I switched my watch on and pretty much ran like a scalded cat just to see what happened. And I actually got round in 1 hour 55. So it proved I was ready to break my PB, um, and go under 2 hours. But yeah, and then having tried those first 24 times, the 26th half marathon, which happened to be in Amsterdam a week later, I also went under 2 hours again. So it again rather proved I was ready to do it. I have a whole host of times in the 2 hour, 2 hours one, and 2 hours two. Um, yeah.
Have you kept records from every event?
Oh gosh, yes. I could email the Excel spreadsheet in terms of date, finish time, and the event. Um, I have medals from, well, at the moment, 98 of them that will become 99 on Sunday. But I can honestly say I have done 100 back in, I'm going to say 2005, could have been 2006. I did the Stroud half marathon in Gloucestershire. Um, Reasonably undulating course, but what I would term a fair course. There were ups, there were downs, there were level bits. It was one of those where I started to threaten 2 hours, but then never quite got there. They gave T-shirts rather than medals. So I have a Stroud half marathon T-shirt from whatever year, but only 99 medals after Sunday, which may mean I have to do at least one more half marathon to get that 100th medal.
Oh, I think so. When did 100 become an issue for you then? Did you get to sort of 50 and think, well, I absolutely have to do 100, or was it a goal fairly early on?
That's a great question. Certainly not early on. And I would say, it was, I used to do 4 or 5 half marathons a year and they just grew in number. And as I got towards 50, I suppose somewhere a few years later, there was always going to be 100, but it wasn't really a point of focus that I thought, oh, right, I have to do this one because that's the next one towards. Probably the last 20 or so, it has very much become a case of, oh, I need to get there. Um, but it was never, as I say, at the end of my first one, I thought, well, that's probably it. There started and ended my running career on Tyneside in one day. But it was the following week that the marketing would come round. As a finisher in this year's event, if you would like a place next year, provided you sign up by such and such a date, we guarantee you a place. Again, that all sounds very different to how entries work for runs these days. Great North Run and mailing saying you finish this year, have a place next year. So that's why I signed up for the second one. And then I suppose curiosity took me somewhere other than Tyneside. So my first two were definitely Great North Runs. I was trying to think whether my third one was. And then I sort of went rogue, so to speak, and went to Reading and other such places. And the bug sort of bit, because remember in those days there was no such thing as park run either.
No.
So anything you did was an event. It wasn't sort of that community feel, come together, go for a jog round. You did an event because you did an event. And first one, as I say, was 2001. I didn't join a running club until mid 2004. So those first 3 years, all my training was, plodding around the roads on my own. I guess I'd subscribed to Runner's World by then, so I was taking on board what they were saying. My first marathon was 2004. So I suppose 3 years of curiosity in terms of, well, I wonder what going twice as far really is like.
How many marathons have you done?
It's about 14, I think. There's a couple of not dubious ones. They've all been 26.2 miles. The first dubious one, as I will call it, came around COVID, because working for a charity as I do, and part of the running club for the best part of 20 years, I'd either been at the London Marathon through running a drink station, or at a charity cheerpoint. And then, of course, if you remember, in 2020, COVID arrived 2 to 3 weeks before the London Marathon, and it suddenly got called off. I was told to shield, so I was one of those people that couldn't even go and do their 1 hour's exercise in the park, or go and queue at a supermarket. I was confined to my 4 garden walls, and I don't have a massive garden. Equally, I do have a garden. So I thought, what am I going to do on marathon day? And I thought, so I measured out a figure-of-8 course involving the back garden and front garden, which came to 72 meters. I did the maths and worked out that a full marathon was 608 laps, allowing a little bit extra to make sure I did cover 26.2 miles. And thought, why not? And the weather around that time was quite simply breathtaking. I mean, if ever we're going to have another pandemic, let's have it in the middle of a March, April heat wave, for goodness sake. And I created a Just Giving page, and I thought, wow, let's see what people do. And our charity ask that year was £2,000 for a place. And I didn't remotely think by using social media I'd get close to that. Plus, I'm only going round and round my garden, albeit it was 26.2 miles. And one or two people put 20 quid on, and I guess they were as bored as the rest of the nation, couldn't do anything, didn't have things to spend their money on. And as the 3-week countdown went to 2 weeks and went to 1 week, I'd put a few more Facebook messages out, but I'm not a big social media user, so I have fewer followers than Taylor Swift, put it that way. And as the day dawned, I'd raised nearly £1,000, which it's not bad. And then I had a friend come round and sat on my garden wall for the second half. She missed the part to Tower Bridge, so to speak, but was there for the latter stages. I'm not sure how legal sitting on people's garden walls was during COVID, but anyway, she didn't enter the property. But she did take over my social media. and started taking pictures. I would appear in the front garden every, I don't know, 30 seconds or however long it what took to get round. And she posted and posted. Suffice to say that in the 3 weeks and including marathon itself, I raised £2,300,
Wow.
which kind of goes to prove if you have the right fundraising campaign and catch the moment, you will be successful. You know, there's no set formulas. There's no you have to do this, this, and this, and it will work, or if you don't do this, it won't work. It just caught a moment in time. It was a novel event, and it worked. And as I say, to 2,300, which to the charity I work for, was very, very much needed at those times because our income had just gone off a cliff face. We didn't have a marathon for starters, and our budget for the marathon every year is about 40 to 50,000 pounds. I think at the time it was called off, we had about 15,000 pounds already raised. So services for charities don't stop, but income streams did, and that was quite a tricky time. So that's why I say 14 marathons. I have another one. My other dubious one is around one of the virtual Londons, which I did do with someone else, but so I did cover the marathon distance, but I don't.
Well, they all count. You have to count them because you did the distance. So just back on the fundraising. How many how many of the races that you've done have you fundraised for?
Not many would be the quick answer. Of half marathons, certainly the first couple of Great North runs I would have done, and then it's been selected after that because I don't
I suppose
believe.
it has to be, doesn't it? Because you can't fundraise for every one of them because you
Yeah.
just run out of donors, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, my biggest year of half marathons, I did 9 in 1 year. There's no way if you're going to Friends 9 times in a year. So I've tended to do something every 3 or 4 years. It has been for a whole range of different charities. My first Great North Run was for, do you know what? I think they were still Imperial Cancer Research in those days rather than Cancer Research UK. I've run for the Heart Foundation. I ran for Sue Ryder, because they looked after my mum in her final days. Um, oh, I you say standout halves. The longer I think about it, I did do a Royal Parks at one point for ZSL London Zoo, dressed in a penguin costume. Don't know quite how I could forget that one. Um, so ZSL I've run for. Um, leukemia. They've got blood. What they were both Bloodwise and leukemia research, and they've undergone a number of different names. Sunday coming up, I run with a new vest, so to speak, in that it will be for Thames Valley Air Ambulance, who around 18 months ago were responsible for picking me up when I was not at my best, well, I say having had, I was in the midst of a cardiac arrest. So but for Thames Valley Air Ambulance, there maybe wouldn't have been a 97th half marathon onwards. So I feel it's kind of up to me to put a few pounds back in the coffers because those helicopters don't come cheap in terms of getting them off the ground.
No, they certainly don't. And how have you gone about fundraising for this one then? Have you been, is it Facebook driven again, or have you done something different?
No, it's for someone that doesn't really like social media. I have fallen back on it. Um, I should say I've taken my place from Thames Valley Air Ambulance, so it is what's known as a charity place. So there was a minimum fundraising commitment, which was only £300. I say only, for some people, I recognise £300 is a lot of money, but in fundraising terms, it's not a London marathon at 2 to 2,500, where I think your plans and ideas have to be far more robust and far more detailed. Whereas £300, my thoughts from the outset were, do you know what? I know enough people that if I just go to them and say, I'm doing this, will you sponsor me? I'm going to get there. So there've been no quiz nights or barbecues or invites to come round and dine or anything like that. Um, I've tried to send out messages at notable dates. So I signed up for the event last August, at which point I'd only done 97 halves, so I had to plan the 98th as well. Didn't bother fundraising until late January. I'm certainly not going to people 8 and 9 months out saying, "Oh, I'm doing a half marathon." They'll go, "Are you?" Because for them and for me, that would just be commonplace. It wouldn't have stood out. I think it was a couple of months before I sent a message out saying, 2 months today, I will be taking part in. I am running 4. You can all work out why. And 1 or 2 people did sponsor me, but it wasn't huge. Um, as a fundraiser, I know that people sponsor you late. As a charity person, I want people to sponsor them early because obviously it's nice to see the money coming in. Um, I then did a 1 month to go message. I The day I was in Malta doing the Malta half, I said, "Look, if you can't hang on until my 100th half, this is the 99th, feel free to sponsor." And each time there's been 1 or 2 other people add on and add on. There will be a message later today with a 72 hours to go. It's not too late. You can make a difference to someone on the day they're probably having the worst day of their lives and they really do need Thames Valley Air Ambulance's help. As I say, my target was 300. As of this morning, I think I was at about 620, 630. So I've more than doubled what they had asked for. And I would like to think I'll finish up at about 750. So in the context of this event, I feel I've done well. Clearly, if I'd taken a London Marathon place from them, then my target would have been more like 2,000, and I would have needed to have been a lot more expansive in my fundraising plans. There would have had to have been that organised quiz night or something like that to raise
Yeah,
funds.
yeah, definitely. Well, let's quickly talk about that then. Just give us a quick summary of where you are now, what you're doing, and just briefly talk through your London Marathon team of this year and any standout fundraising feats that you think might inspire others.
Yeah, so the charity I work for is Aspire. So we're a spinal cord injury charity. I've been there now nearly 20 years, but I was at another charity before that. So I've probably about a 25-year involvement with the London Marathon, and I've seen it grow over the years. It is now a truly enormous event. Um, our charity, we have between 15 and 20 runners every year. That's the amount of places we have from London Marathon. I won't go into the whys and the wherefores and how all that works. That's a whole nother session in itself. So we have about 15 to 20 places. Our team is a mix, really. Some of them have direct connections to spinal cord injury, i.e., they have a relative or friend who has sustained an injury. And again, I won't go into the details of the implications of that, but suffice to say, at the moment, there is no cure for spinal injury. So, Aspire, we are looking to provide as independent an existence as people can possibly have. That's where our funds go towards. Rather than a cure, we are looking to provide people with independent lives now. So, where people do have that affinity, that friend, that relation, clearly they have a good story to tell, a bit like me and Thames Valley Air Ambulance with my cardiac arrest. And that always makes fundraising so much easier for the individual. If you're going to your friends and family and they can see an immediate connection as to why you're doing it, they will be more generous in their support. They're not going to provide a tenner because, to almost get you away because you're running for some obscure charity just because you want to do the event. They can see a direct affinity. Some of our runners, like most charities, just simply want a place in the event. There really is that crying demand for. It's become such an iconic event. I think the ballot this year had something like 850,000 applicants. For me, I think it will top 1 million for 2026. So, yeah, there is that desperation for a place. And I would like to think the support we as a charity give to people who come to us without that affinity, they leave afterwards knowing a lot more about spinal injury and why fundraising and our support is important. But having had a very good experience with Aspire, we look after them. I'd like to think my experience of running and, all those training miles I've done, I can answer questions they have. I can make suggestions in terms of perhaps what they need and should be doing. I can help them with fundraising. It's a very personal, very quirky support. If you want that corporate line, probably don't come to Aspire, but we are quite successful. We ask people to raise 2,000 for a place at the moment. Our average last year was 3,500, which meant overall we raised just over £60,000 last year, which for us I would call us a medium-sized charity. I think others would probably say we're quite large. I mean, we've got about 8 staff in total with fundraising side of things. So I think we're quite small to medium. £60,000 to us is a huge amount of money. Um, and we're certainly, the London Marathon for us is essential. It's also slightly profile raising, being such a big national event. We have our cheer point at 17 miles with our banners up, um, usually seen on the television as the leader flashes past in about half a second, but blink and you'll miss us. But we're there every year. So yeah, it's
What superstar fundraising ideas have you seen this year? Anything new, or is it
nothing immediately stands out because a lot of time that I mean, one of the beauties of Just Giving as a fundraising setup for us is money just arrives there, and when I say we don't ask too many questions, that sounds rather seedy, doesn't it? Um, but as long as the money is ticking over on Just Giving pages, we don't always get to find out an awful lot about how it has arrived there. I mean, as I've hinted already, one or two of the runners have sort of said they've got quiz nights coming up, they've got barbecues coming up. For me, a quiz night is always a standard classic because people come along, they're getting something for their tenner or their 20 quid. They'll probably sponsor you as well. They get a good night out, they might win. Um, for me, I don't think you can beat a quiz night as a
No, and I'm glad you touched on that, because I think particularly the economic climate that we're in at the moment. I mean, people are happy to donate up to a point, but if they can get something
yeah,
from their donation, I think that's really, really important, because it is tough out there. And if you're saying, "Oh, sponsor me 10, £20 or whatever," that's a lot of money. But if you're getting a bit of a night out for your 10 or £20,
absolutely.
it feels an absolute no-brainer. But it means that the runner has to make a bit more effort than just hitting their social media followers and expecting that to work. Sometimes it does work, and if you've got a massive following, then maybe that will work. But I think on the whole, most of us need to make an effort and actually do something. Put on a mini event like a quiz night.
Well, and what I say to people is rather than just invite all your close friends who, let's be honest, are probably going to sponsor you anyway, you'd certainly
Yeah.
hope they do, challenge your friends to bring 3 or 4 strangers who you don't know. And
Uh,
that way, suddenly, if one friend brings 4 people you don't know and they pay a tenner, that's £40 you just wouldn't have got. If they
yeah,
then sponsor you as well, suddenly 4 or 5 friends who've bought 4 or 5 others, it's a bit like an onion, if you cascade outwards, you don't necessarily have to do all the fundraising yourself.
yeah,
You
that's
can,
a good point.
others will act as agents and recruiters and things like that. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think you just have to work so much harder when you're looking at 2,000. It's like you said before,
yes,
with 300 for landmarks. Yeah, of course you want to get more than 300, but 300 could be just a few friends on Facebook. Whereas
exactly.
2,000, 2,500 is a whole different animal, and you do have to think out a bit more laterally than you do for a
And you
small.
have to be persistent. I think some people think one email or one Facebook post and money will come flooding in. And the fact is, no, it won't.
No.
Even with some of your closest friends, it is that third and fourth ask that finally triggers oh, yeah, I've been meaning to do that for
Yeah,
ages. And
yeah,
then they will finally do it. The beauty for me as well of it being £300, worst case scenario, I could have found that and paid it myself as well. Um,
yeah. Yes, whereas finding 2,000 for
no,
London Marathon is not something that the vast majority of people are going to be able to do.
no.
Well, that was really, really interesting. I can definitely feel another episode coming up soon to find out all about Sunday and all the other events you've got planned. I'm sure there's
Yep.
I'm sure 200 is a potential target for you now.
Probably not. Based on the first 100 taking 24 years,
Well, you'll just have to rattle through and start doing 10 or 15 a year.
it would
Uh,
be the 10 or 15 a year, I think, Tim.
Yeah, well, it's possible. It's possible. Have an amazing day on
Will do.
Sunday.
Thank you.
It will be a very memorable event for sure, and hopefully one of the highlights in your collection. And fingers crossed for the last few weeks of fundraising for you guys at Aspire.
Yes, thank you.
Obviously,
Appreciate that.
obviously a crucial time for all charities now. Have a brilliant time, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this Sapphire Running Zone podcast. Keep checking back as we have lots more podcasts coming soon.